Flexibility and Surgical Training Consortium, which is an experiment that's been going on now for several years, looking at the ability to really track residents into training in subspecialty areas in their final year of training, moving away from the concept of a one-size-fits-all model for training, which really has been our model for as long as we can remember. So Dr. Klingensmith will start us off, and we'll move forward from there. Please welcome Mary Klingensmith.
Thank you, Rebecca. Good afternoon, everyone. I will be describing a sort of in the trenches version of how to create specialty training tracks in general surgery. This is some work that I've had the privilege to lead over the last couple of years. Some of you are aware of this already, and I'm sorry if it's repeat to some of you, but I do have some new data for some of you who have heard this before, which I hope will be of interest. Rebecca, thank you. Okay. Nothing to disclose. So everybody knows more and more trainees are pursuing fellowship training. We actually heard from Dr. Lewis today that for the 2014 class that just took the examination, rather than 80%, it was 73%, but it's a big number. This in context against the fact that for our medical students, they have more and more opportunities as they consider residency training and the so-called integrated training programs in both vascular and CT surgery, where you can match right out of medical school, are gaining in popularity and number. They're very popular with intern applicants. For those of you who are involved in the intern recruitment process, you know that. There has been some decline in the interest in general surgery as a specialty since the early 2000s, when we had a very bad match year in 2003, bad by general surgery standards, not bad by many other specialty standards. But overall, the quality is very well preserved, and in fact, this was actually another competitive year by all standard metrics for general surgery applications. So we seem to still be doing well as a specialty, but we do have a lot of other things. For those of you who were in Dr. Lewis's talk this morning, he nicely outlined a lot of them. There's been some technological changes that have happened, a lot of what our residents' experience has changed, and I'd also submit to you that the advances we've seen in technology, as well as basically the explosion of knowledge, I think has made a perception for both our learners who are entering training, but even some of us who are past it, that we really need a niche in surgical practice to be able to truly master a body of knowledge. So I was asked to speak specifically about the flexible training option. This is a modification of the ABS requirements, and this was initially termed the Ashley Rule. It was something that Stan Ashley, when he was chair of the board of the American Board of Surgery, helped push this through, and it was adopted in June of 2011. The way it works is that if you're a vascular surgery trainee, you do 4 years of general surgery, and then you go into 2 years of vascular fellowship. You finish in 6 years total. You basically save a year. In thoracic surgery, you don't save any time, but you get 12 additional months of CT surgery spread over your 4th and 5th years of your general surgery residency program. There are relatively few programs that participate. You have to go through an accreditation or that's not the right term. You have to go through a process to get permission from both the RRC and the board to do this. There are 6 programs certified to do this in vascular, 10 in thoracic, and actually relatively few graduates to date. This is data that's updated as of this past fall. There were 16 graduates who submitted themselves for the certification exams in the fall, and 12 in CT surgery. We've been doing this at my program since the programs were first available, and we feel very comfortable with them and actually account for a number of those 16 in vascular and 12 in thoracic graduates. The only other large program that has been doing this is UT Southwestern, actually, where Danny Scott is. Across all of the programs that participate, though, we've been able to show that it's actually been a success. The trainees who do it love it. They get to their interest much sooner. They get to start doing pump cases if they're wanting to be cardiac surgeons and so forth much sooner. They get 12 additional months in their specialty of interest. And in the case of vascular surgery, there's actually a time advantage, and they get through with 1 year less of training. They've had very good board passage rates. All of these people have submitted to both the general surgery board process as well as their specialty board, vascular and CT. You may be aware that CT no longer requires general surgery certification as a prerequisite, but everyone in the CT programs that has gone through this has elected to get the general surgery boards as well. And so far, it seems to be a success. So with some of that data, the ABS, again, in June 2011, moved to basically say that you could sort of do an ESP anything. You can have up to 12 months in your final 36 months of training to spend in an area of specialty interest. This is entirely voluntary on the part of both the trainee and the program and should be done selectively on a case-by-case basis. I put the board website up there for more information. So based on that, a lot of us around the country in different programs have been talking about the fact that this was a great opportunity that we should take advantage of and try to prospectively study. And so with the encouragement actually of the American Surgical Leadership, the year this passed was when my chair, Tim Eberlein, was actually president of the ASA. He really encouraged us to come together, and with a lot of ASA leadership who are listed there, we had an organizational meeting. I've listed all the people who were there, and it was John Hunter who basically, as the English major, was able to come up with a great term for us, which was FIST, the Flexibility in Surgical Training Work Group, and we then launched with some specific goals. We basically, of course, wanted the graduates to have additional experience in their area of intended practice. We also, importantly, want them to feel greater comfort with independent practice immediately following surgery. As you know, there's a lot of data that suggests that our residents do lack confidence upon graduation. And also, of course, an outcome measure. We want them to be able to be prepared to provide better care to their patients. But an ultimate goal of this project would be to focus and hopefully even shorten training. We do have a lot of concerns, and it's come up a lot in our work group as we've deliberated this. Whether you call it general surgery, as Dr. Lewis calls it, or comprehensive general surgery, we need to make sure that we still meet the workforce demands that we have in our country, and we somehow need to strengthen and define the specialty of general surgery. So initially we had 10 residency programs that came to the table. We agreed we would do a prospective analysis of this. These were all of our participant programs when we launched. USC is in parentheses because Tony Senegor, who was at USC when we launched, left there, and so we lost them as a participant program. So we're down to 9 programs. I should point out that any residency program is allowed to use this flexibility option. They're just not part of our prospective study. This group came together and also at the encouragement of the ACGME actually submitted this to the RRC. It actually became an informational item. There were some questions whether this should be approved as some special pilot, but it seemed as though it fit within existing ABS and RRC structure to just be an informational item. We are IRB approved. We've gone through the protocols that the ABS has set up for each participant program and each individual participant resident. And we spend a lot of time in our early organizational efforts of drafting a recommended rotations document. And this was done with input from the component boards and advisory councils of the American Board of Surgery, as well as any stakeholder group that somehow wasn't well represented at the board, plastic surgery being one of those. And we basically worked off this document, which is pulled from the ABS website. If you go and look up flexible training, you'll see this document there. This was pretty non-specific. It doesn't project very well, but for GI surgery, it was like open abdominal operations. Well, you know, what did that mean? So we wanted something much more specific than that. So we have drafted a document and then talked about what the individual training years might look like. So for an individual residency program, whatever it is that Emory offers, those residents get that common PGY 1 and 2 and usually PGY 3 years. We're confining the flexible rotations primarily to the 4th and 5th year in our study, and that's actually just been more a logistics matter. I'll talk in a few moments. The scheduling of this can be really complicated. After that core 3 years, everybody branches off. And in broad strokes, we've conceived of this in different tracks. There's sort of a GI track, a CV track, a comprehensive general surgery track, and then kind of everything else. Plastics, breast, and endocrine sort of fell out at the bottom. And if you conceive of it this way, it helps to some degree for program directors who are trying to think about how to, as I call it, build the puzzle of making the rotation schedule for the individual residents, because a lot of these rotations have a lot of these specialties have rotation overlap. So this is an example of what the complex GI surgery schedule might look like for a 4th, 5th, and 6th year resident. A lot of things that happen in the 4th and 5th year are, you know, sort of core general surgery, emergency general surgery, perhaps colorectal general surgery at the VA, things that the chief residents might otherwise have done. But added in there are some dedicated rotations, perhaps in liver transplant and HPB, that perhaps in this residency program were not routinely part of this senior residency schedule. and then the fellowship year that would follow. This actually mirrors exactly the template that the ESP for CT surgery uses, and so that's actually how we derived this, which was sort of looked at how similar and dissimilar we could make those. So as far as our actual study goes, we currently have 35 who were in the batch last year and 38 for the current year over all 9 programs, so 138 residents total. It's, you know, we're basically around 170 residents in the complete study at the moment. We chose to have a control in each residency program, which was the chief residents from last year who were not eligible for the flexible training track. We're doing a lot of data collection, collecting all of the rotation schedules for everybody on the 4 and 5 years from all of the 9 participant programs. And the outcome measures are listed there. It's milestones data collected twice a year, ABSITE scores, operative case logs, the operative performance rating scales, and then as a sort of ultimate endpoint, the QE and certifying exam results. This is a huge database that's actually been constructed and is now being populated by a data entry person that I have at WashU. You can imagine it's very complicated trying to match up rotation schedules across the 9 residency programs, and we'll see how it all shakes out in the end, but we're at least prospectively trying to collect all the data in hopes that we can make some sense of all of it in the end. I do want to just share with you a little bit of subjective survey data that we have. A year ago exactly, April of 2014, we administered a survey to all of the residents and program directors at these participating programs. Again, these were just the residents who were affected by the flexible track, the year 4 and 5 residents. We had a pretty good response rate, which you can see there. And sort of the take-home points are bulleted there. Participants and even non-participants. So again, like chief residents who weren't able to do these flexible tracks, these are the sort of summary ideas. They believe that flexible training enhances an individual's career, allows for more autonomy and mentorship in the given specialty, provides some gains in both clinical and operative experience, will better prepare a trainee for a fellowship, but it interestingly was raised by the residents themselves. Where does general surgery fit into this? The program directors, similarly, the summary statements were that it also was thought to enhance training. So if I've got 3 people who want to do HPB, it's really tough. So we've had to actually make some compromises as to how much time an individual resident can get on a given specialty track. It can be really challenging to build that puzzle, make that schedule, and it takes many iterations, and across the 9 participant programs, despite our best intentions, we've not been able to provide equivalent experiences because of this very issue. We have different numbers of trainees, we have different numbers of fellows in the host programs. It's been really a challenge to make it work. However, even though we can't make it perfect, the trainees have loved it, and that I think is reflected from that subjective survey. 2 other points, concerns about the workforce for general surgery. If we make it even easier for residents to pursue subspecialty training, will we have even fewer people left to really be the general surgeons needed in the small and rural hospitals? We really have a public that needs general surgeons, and depending on what you believe about the workforce projections, you were already down 25% in the last decade, and it's projected to be down another 18% over the next decade. So we've got a populace that really needs general surgeons, and yet with this flexible option, we're making it easier for residents to get more quickly to a niche opportunity, and perhaps they just won't be as broadly trained as a general surgeon. And as a parenthetic expression I'll just throw out there, you probably are well aware from your own institutions that there are a number of specialty trained surgeons who still take general surgery call. And so if they've missed a lot of the chief resident rotations in general surgery, they're going to be less well prepared to sort of do some of that call, and that remains a real question. And then lastly, we're just underway collecting all this data, and I really don't know when we'll be able to have meaningful data from the current prospective study other than some subjective survey data, which I shared with you today. So I'm going to stop right there. I'll be happy to take some questions when the other panelists have had a chance to speak. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. That was fantastic. Our next speaker, as I'm sure known to all of you, is Dr. Jo Beiske. She is really running all of assessment and evaluation at the American Board of Surgery and has really been a key leader in these discussions. Presently, she's actually chairing a task force for the American Board of Medical Specialties around the concept of being able to recognize training outside of an ACGME context as long as it's delivered in a high-quality manner and meets certain parameters. And I hope that we'll hear more about that from her, because that's obviously critically important to these discussions as we think about how we move ahead in this area. So please welcome Dr. Beiske.